physically. As we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let us take a moment to reflect the meaning of place, and doing so recognise the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I am conducting this webinar today, on the Bragalong people of the Gunai-Kurnai clan. We acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging of all the land we work and live on, and their ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect. So I really would like to tell you how privileged and honoured to have these wonderful speakers today to give you an insight into the world of asbestos issues. Our first speaker will be Jane Anderson, the chair of the Latrobe Valley Asbestos Task Force. She's going to enlighten you on what has been happening around asbestos in Latrobe Valley from a working group perspective, and the issues that we've uncovered. On that working group, just for your interest, there is ourselves, Asbestos Council of Victoria, WorkSafe Victoria, Department of Environment, Land and Water, Sustainability Victoria, Wellington Shire, Baw Baw Shire, Latrobe City, Latrobe Health Assembly, the Resource Recovery Gippsland, Environmental Protection Authority. We've got unions, AMWU, CMFU, ASU, ETU and AWU. The Latrobe Valley Authority, the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing Victoria. This working group is addressing asbestos issues in Latrobe Valley, Victoria. We envisage that the issues we identify and attempt to address may be used across the whole of Victoria into the future. We also have, well, it was going to be Team Packham today, but Jo is an apology, unfortunately, Kevin's wife. She's not too well today, so Kevin is still online, and I am sure you'll be inspired and educated to the world of families who go through a diagnosis of asbestos. In this instance, Kevin has peritoneal mesothelioma, and Jo, who we've taped these interviews so that you will not miss out on Jo's talk, and the family are there to support him in any way they can. Kevin does not know where he contracted his mesothelioma from, as he never worked with it or renovated a home, but he was a real estate agent, so that's very interesting. Before we start the webinar, our speakers have been pre-recorded. Our speakers are here online bar Jo at the moment, and we'll answer any questions that you put to them in the chat box after the talks have finished by Jane and Kevin. We will attempt to get through as many as possible in time that we have. If we do not get through all the questions, don't worry, we will endeavour to get your questions answered and posted on our website along with the recording of this webinar. We will advise when the video and the questions go up on our website into the future. So please sit back and listen to our inspirational speakers. Jane Anderson, Chair of the Latrobe Valley Asbestos Task Force, is first. Thank you very much. Jane, we can't hear you.
One minute, just a quick technical thing. We're just going to fix Jane's audio. Stand by.
My name's Jane Anson. I'm the Latrobe Health Advocate and I chair the Latrobe Valley Asbestos Task Force. It's great to have this opportunity to present to you and talk about the work of the Asbestos Task Force and do what we can to prevent asbestos-related disease in Latrobe. I'm just going to share my screen, so bear with me for a second. So I'm hoping that you can all see those slideshows now. I would like to commence by acknowledging the original custodians of the land on which we are having this webinar. We're all on different lands, but wherever we are, it always was and always will be the land of Aboriginal people. I'm on the land of the Barrackong people of the Gunai Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present, emerging and future. I was appointed as the Latrobe Health Advocate in May 2018 by the Minister for Health. The creation of the role was one of several recommendations to emerge from the 2014 Hazelwood mine fire inquiry. My role as advocate is to provide independent advice to the Victorian Government on behalf of Latrobe communities about system and policy changes to improve people's health and wellbeing. The role is a key mechanism of the Latrobe Health Innovation Zone, which is designed to give voice to community aspirations in the planning and delivery of better health and wellbeing outcomes, and where a process of co-design with individuals and organisations is actively encouraged. I'm going to talk to you now about the Latrobe Valley Asbestos Task Force. Following long-standing concerns about asbestos in the Latrobe Valley, the task force was commissioned in February 2019 to review how asbestos was being managed on industrial sites. After the first meeting, the scope of the task force changed very quickly, and it was decided to broaden the scope to all sites, including industrial, public, government and residential locations where asbestos was located. The reason why this change occurred was because of the increasing popularity of home renovation television programs and the grave concern that many home owners are not fully aware of the risk of asbestos exposure when they do undertake home renovation activities at their own home. And this change in scope was due to the concerns raised by the community. All the stakeholders were brought together at the initial meetings of the task force, and this included government agencies, local councils, unions and community groups. And you can see the membership in the slide there. Just going to talk about the terms of reference of the task force and the key functions. The terms of reference were developed which broadly included reviewing how asbestos is identified, handled, managed and disposed of, and making recommendations to government to improve systems and safety outcomes for the whole community. Task force members developed the terms of reference and a strategic plan to guide the work of the task force. And then we set about working together to make headway into the ambitious undertaking of better managing asbestos in Latrobe Valley. In addition to monthly meetings, we've held a number of workshops to do what we might call deep dives, deeper understanding in particular issues. We've always encouraged frank and open conversations to get to the heart of any matter. And it's been one of the key indicators of success of the task force is that trust that has developed and the collaboration in working together to better manage asbestos in the Latrobe Valley. The task force has key priority areas and you'll see those mentioned there. So raising awareness across all levels of government and the community about the contemporary risks of asbestos exposure in our homes and not just in our workplaces, with a particular focus on increasing awareness among home renovators and apprentices. And we know that need to increase asbestos awareness isn't just within the community, it's also within different departments of government and within industry, so everyone is coming together to better understand the risks related to asbestos. Improving the ability of a community member to make a complaint and clarifying the roles and responsibilities of state and local governments is another key priority area to reduce that complexity for people when they are wanting to address a problem relating to asbestos. An ongoing review of regulatory systems and processes to identify gaps and areas for improvement so we can understand better ways to manage asbestos and to inform those policy changes in the system. Another key area is about making formal recommendations to government for change that will help safeguard the health of our community. And we have made a number of recommendations already to government about changes in the system, which I'll talk about shortly. As a result of the collaboration within the task force and work with different departments and again industry groups, we've developed a series of asbestos fact sheets that have been published on the Asbestos Victoria website, and which the local councils on the task force have also printed in information kits for residents. So these fact sheets have been developed using the collective knowledge from our members of the task force and their networks that they're able to reach out to, and then publicising in a way that will reach as many people as possible in the community. They've also been recently translated into 6 other languages and will also be published more broadly. And those languages include Indonesian, Vietnamese, traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese, Arabic and Persian languages. One of the key issues for the asbestos task force was to understand how much asbestos is in our homes. We have undertaken some work to understand the volume of the residential asbestos remaining in our homes. And when I say some work, that's probably an underestimation of the amount of work that has gone into understanding how much asbestos is there. Because for the first time, we've developed a model to estimate the quantity of asbestos. And it is a model that can be replicated in other regions and is a substantial amount of work utilising local knowledge and data that exists in our local government areas. So how much asbestos is there? Well, it's concerning because across Latrobe, Bawbor and Wellington, there is an estimated total volume of 3.12 million metres squared of asbestos-containing materials remaining in our homes. This is a significant amount of asbestos. To give you an idea of how much asbestos that is, the City of Melbourne is 9.9 million square metres. So what we've got of asbestos in our 3 local government areas, Latrobe, Bawbor and Wellington, is about a third of the City of Melbourne. And we wanted to understand this to inform our work, not to cause fear, but to raise awareness of the amount of asbestos that is in our communities. So how much asbestos is in our homes in the different shires? So you can see there that there's 80% in Latrobe, 60% in Bawbor and 70% in Wellington of homes that have got asbestos-containing materials. Asbestos is mostly found in the eaves and the wet areas of the home. And if your home was built before 1990, there's a good chance that it has asbestos somewhere. So as I mentioned, we have been making recommendations to government about what needs to change in the policy area and the system to improve the management of asbestos and to prevent asbestos-related diseases. So following all the work that we have been doing, we made recommendations in November last year to government, and those recommendations are currently being reviewed by an interdepartmental committee. The recommendations are centred around making the risks of asbestos exposure more widely known and to safeguard the health of our communities. The first of the recommendations is for a local government trial to ensure that anyone who wants to do asbestos removal on their own property has the information that they need to make an informed decision as to whether or not they have the required skills to do that asbestos removal. The second recommendation in relation to compulsory asbestos awareness training for specified occupations will mean that all people who enter trades where they may encounter asbestos will be trained so that they'll know what to look out for. The third recommendation is to bring the demolition notice forward when demolition is occurring so that WorkSafe and others have more oversight when building demolitions occur. So they're aware of it before the demolitions, because at present, the notice is required to be given at the end of each month and not in advance of the demolition. So it prevents us putting things may emanate. The fourth recommendation about an asbestos status certificate or report is to ensure that people know where asbestos could be in any property that they are considering buying or renting, so that they can better manage the risks and be aware of them. If these recommendations are accepted, it is likely that we will see change occur across the state more broadly than within Latrobe. If you are interested to know more about those recommendations, there is a report that is available on our website. We'll give you more details about that before I finish this presentation. You'll see there are breathtaking renovations, and some of you may well have already seen this video. To increase the understanding and awareness of the risk of asbestos exposure in homes, the task force produced a video, which is called Breathtaking Renovations. And as I said, some of you may have already seen it on TV here in Gippsland. You also might have seen it in other ways that YouTube is available through to you and through some of the social media channels. The video is a parody about a very serious issue. So it features Tim, the host of a home renovation show, who keeps getting interrupted by his producer to stop work because it is not known if asbestos is present or not. And that's the key message that the task force wants to get across. You do not know if there is asbestos unless you get a professional to check for it. We're aware that the video has been seen by a number of people and is already resulting in increased awareness of asbestos, but also people seeking out more information because they realise they don't know everything that they might need to know about asbestos. We'll put the link to the YouTube video available so that you can view it in your own time, or you can just search online for Breathtaking Renovations and it will come up for you in a YouTube. So next steps in relation to the task force, we're still continuing our work. We've identified key actions that we want to complete by the end of next year. And the sorts of areas that we are working on is publication of a report into the legacy of asbestos that is remaining in non-residential sectors across Port, Latrobe and Wellington. That report will be complementary to the one that we've already completed that I mentioned about asbestos in the residential sector. The report will be available on the task force website. We're also focusing on the delivery of a joint compliance enforcement strategy involving government regulators and local councils. This will again ensure that working together, so those agencies that have got responsibility for management of asbestos are working together in a streamlined manner, so members of the community can see that and can see that where they are able to go to address their issues in relation to asbestos. We'll also be producing a paper on the sustainability of the model of the task force, and we will promote that model as a prototype used across the state and also nationally. What we have found is that by having a diverse representation of members of the task force, we have got a really great understanding and knowledge of asbestos issues, but also how the system is working together. And we've needed to work, as I mentioned before, collaboratively to enable trust, to ensure that all of sector, government, community response, understanding and delivery of different policy changes to address the issue of asbestos. And it is that knowledge across all of those members that has put us in a very strong position to be able to make recommendations for change. We will be developing a clear understanding of community expectations. We are doing that now, and we will be continuing to do that, about asbestos management and disposal in the Latrobe Valley. So just a bit more details on those next steps. And an example of what I was talking about in relation to people being able to know where they go to in relation to management of asbestos issues and where they can get assistance. So we particularly want to assist the community by pointing them to the right place when they are inquiring about asbestos or asbestos removal activities. And you'll see on the slide there an example of who does what in asbestos. And what that is a pathway and flow chart, which will soon be published on our website and also local council websites, to assist people to understand where they can go to in relation to what particular issue of asbestos. We know it can be quite complicated, and we know people have told us that they might go to one source of information, they get referred to another source, and they get referred to another source. We want to prevent that so people know where they go to, and that those departments, councils working behind the scene are working together in a streamlined way so people will get the answer at that first point of call rather than needing to make multiple phone calls. We are drafting this who does what as we understand what might respond to the issue right now. But we do encourage feedback, and we will adapt this information according to what people tell us. So we encourage people to look at it, use it, see if it is useful, and tell us what changes we need to make it even easier for people. The who does what information will ensure that the issues of where people can go to for asbestos is widely understood, but without oversimplifying it. One thing that we have learned about asbestos is a very complicated issue, and there isn't one organisation or government body that deals with it from end to end. So that's why we need to ensure that all of the system is working together to provide that streamlined, coordinated response to make it easier for people in the community. So finally, I'd just like to end up with the link there to our website and also social media channels. If you'd like to know any more information about the work of the task force, please access the website and please follow us on social media, follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and let us know about any issues that you think that we need to think more about or focus on to ensure that asbestos is better managed in the Latrobe Valley. Thanks very much for being a part of the webinar.
Thank you, Jane. That was a very inspirational talk and very informative of what's going on in Latrobe Valley. Our next speaker up is Team Packham, only one of today. It's Kevin. So over to you, Kevin, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, I'm Kevin. Well, hi, I'm Kevin Packham. This is my wife, Jo. Hi, I'm Kevin. Well, hi, I'm Kevin Packham. This is my wife, Jo.
Hi.
Just, I guess we're just going to spend a bit of time with you just sharing our story over the last few years of what's happened with my diagnosis, how that led up to occurring, and I guess the whole experience from then up to now.
Yes, yes. So it really started quite a few years ago with pain.
Yeah, it
Pain,
did.
pain was the first sign.
Yes, yes, and it seemed that it was just a stomach pain, and it got more and more acute, which meant that I ended up in hospital, and basically they hit me with a whole heap of steroids, which seemed to do the trick. And we didn't think too much more of it, other than obviously going to see my gastroenterologist at the time. And everybody felt that it just seemed to mimic a type of Crohn's disease. So at that stage, that's what we were kind of diagnosed with, or I was, and we had to work out how we were going to just live with that type of disease, being Crohn's.
An autoimmune disease. They couldn't be specific, but
Yeah.
they said it was more likely Crohn's than
Then
anything.
yeah.
And once you would come off the steroids, once you'd wean off those steroids, the pain would come back. You're back in hospital, back on steroids, wean off the steroids, pain would come back. So Kevin was in a cycle, and they did numerous amount of scans, a lot of colonoscopies, and they still, after 2.5 years, couldn't be specific about what was causing the pain. Then early last year, so that's 2020, they talked about doing a laparoscopy, but because of COVID, it wasn't deemed urgent surgery, so it was put off until about June. May, June of last year. And we really had to push to have that laparoscopy done, because, as I said, Kevin was just going in a constant cycle. And
it was getting worse
as
we through 2019, 18, 19. I was in there every 3 months.
That's
it
right.
was 6 months or 8, a bit longer.
the gap was getting
The
shorter.
gap was getting shorter, and the pain was moving around, which that's why they're kind of scratching their heads, because they felt Crohn's would be more in a specific place.
So anyway, we got the results of the laparoscopy. The gastroenterologist called Kevin and I into his office for a meeting and told us that Kevin, that they found peritoneal mesothelioma. He had to explain to us exactly what that was, and when he said the word asbestos, we said, but asbestos? How has Kevin ingested asbestos? He's not a builder, not a tradesperson. We went through the houses we've lived in. We weren't aware of any properties that we lived in that had asbestos. But the reality was, rather than trying to at that stage find out how Kevin had swallowed asbestos, was dealing with the prognosis, which was fairly dire. I'll never forget the gastroenterologist's words, which were, I've found a brilliant surgeon. There's only a few surgeons that can do the type of surgery that you're going to require, and she will need to agree to do that surgery. She'll want to do her own tests to see if you'll qualify to have the surgery, whether it's going to be of benefit to you or not. Unfortunately, if not, you will have up to 12 months only to live. So I strongly suggest you go and put your affairs in order. So the shock.
Yeah, that was something we weren't bargaining for that morning. And it just gives you a total reality check on life, and you prioritize things very quickly in a different way. Obviously, the most important thing there and then at that time was to get a meeting with the surgeon, and my gastrologist was he was fantastic. He pushed and got that literally a turnaround within 48 hours. A couple of days we saw Nabila, Dr. Ansari.
But prior to that, it was actually telling our children.
Yeah.
That was actually very important. But we told the children the same day that we were given the diagnosis and the prognosis. And one of our sons was living in Melbourne, so we had to talk to him through FaceTime with our other 2 children. We told them all at the same time. It was a very, very difficult, emotional time. You know, our granddaughter was there. She was only 1.5 at the time. She'd never seen her mother burst into tears and in floods of tears. It was tough. It was a really tough time. We felt that the best approach with our children was complete honesty. We knew that they turned to Google for everything, even though we asked them not to. We knew that they would. And of course, everything that they read on Google.
Pretty negative.
Yeah.
Pretty negative.
It was. So they didn't have a lot of confidence. Anyway, then we had, the meeting with the surgeon.
Yeah, Dr. Ansari, and basically she said, look, I'll operate if I can. I'll need to do another laparoscopy myself to see what levels I'm basically at. And that came back and I was pretty high. I was on the border of grade 3, grade 4. I think it was a count of in the very high 20s. And once you get into 30 is grade 4. So I was on the borderline, but she said because of my age and my health that she would operate. And we basically had a lead up time of just a few weeks before the operation, which took place in September of
Sorry,
year.
just to interrupt. Kevin's score after her laparoscopy was 15. So that was considered stage 2.
Right. And then
the first score was actually 15.
And
and for that reason, she decided to go ahead with the surgery because it was stage 2. And so she felt Kevin would have a good chance of having a successful surgery.
Yeah, and I think what's come out of this is the scans that they take as well. It's a very hard disease to diagnose because if you have a lot of CT scans, it doesn't really show up, not even a PET scan.
No, the PET scan showed nothing.
Showed nothing. She ordered a PET scan, it really didn't show anything.
And that's because Kevin's mesothelioma is epithelioid, so it's a very slow growing and a slow moving cancer cell. And the slow cancer cells apparently don't have a good chance of showing in PET scans. So anyway, Kevin, we were very, very fortunate, very, very blessed that you qualified, that she agreed to do the surgery. And the surgery was a very long surgery. It was 9.5 hours. You can explain what was removed.
Yeah, well, pretty much the entire omentum, the peritoneum, my spleen, a section, two sections of my colon on either side. She did a little bit of the diaphragm as well, the bottom of the diaphragm, to leave some space in order to so that the cells wouldn't jump across.
And she burnt the
small intestine, liver and small intestine. So yes, there was a lot there, and she felt confident after the surgery that she had got all of the cancer. And yeah, it was 9.5 hours. I spent 30 days in hospital.
When she called me post Kevin's surgery that evening, Kevin's actual score, once she opened Kevin up and was inside doing the surgery, ended up actually being 29.
Yeah.
So that was borderline stage 3-4, which was almost twice as much disease as she could see in the laparoscopy. So yeah, and you also had HIPEC during the surgery.
Yeah,
Kevin had HIPEC, which is the hot chemotherapy wash while everything was open. And then it was a very, very challenging recovery.
Yeah, it's a tough. I wouldn't want anybody to go through it, but if they have to, it's mentally as demanding as it is physically. I got myself physically in shape before the operation, and so I could also be mentally strong, and I needed to be, because you have some very, tough days in there, and you have a setback like any, I guess, major surgery, but you have to be very strong, both physically and mentally. But there's always going to be an end, and there was, and then I got out and recouped pretty quickly thereafter when I got home.
We did. From the day that Kevin was diagnosed, I guess speaking from the partner, the carer's perspective, you feel quite helpless, and it's sort of like, well, what can I do? I've got to be able to save my husband. What can I do? I'm not a surgeon. What can I do? So I took it upon myself that my role was going to be to look after Kevin's health. So I did as much research as I could about foods that were good for Kevin, avoiding or eliminating anti-inflammatory foods from our diet, because my own readings says that high inflammation foods is not good for cancer. Likewise, foods with sugar, processed foods. So we eliminated all of that, and I started shopping at organic markets. We've always had a healthy diet, but this was just taking that healthy diet to the next level. And we've maintained that, and we still maintain that diet.
Fresh juice every morning.
Yep, we have fresh celery, carrot, apple, ginger juice and a cold presser, which we make every single day. A lot of exercise. We've got a dog, so we walk the dog. We do swimming. You play golf.
Go on the bike.
That's right. Yep.
Yep.
Cycling. And also we do see an integrated GP as well as a traditional GP. So from day one, Kevin started to have vitamin C infusions, because we'd also researched and heard that that was very beneficial as well. And Kevin continues to have those infusions. And we were in a very fortunate position that we had sold our business 2 years prior to Kevin's diagnosis. And that was because of Kevin's deteriorating health. We realised that owning our own business created a lot of stress, and it was advised by the gastroenterologist to reduce as much stress as possible. So we were in a position that we could sell our business and stay working in the business as contractors. When Kevin was diagnosed, we sat down as a family, and we all, because Kevin, he was always been a 6-day-a-week workaholic for his life, and we all said, no, now's the time to stop work. We don't know what the future holds. Make the most of every day, enjoy life. We've got 2 grandchildren, a 3rd one on the way. It's time to really just embrace life and avoid as much stress as possible. And the other thing that you started to do post-surgery was
meditation.
Yeah.
I found that something that I certainly wouldn't have had on my to-do list before I got my diagnosis, but post the and before, but mainly straight after the surgery, I found that to be invaluable. Just those key minutes about just calming yourself, keeping stress-free, breathing exercises. It's been very rewarding, and I think very helpful in the whole recovery process. And there was just one cycle they recommended of mop-up chemo after my surgery. So I had 4 cycles.
4 sessions.
4 sessions. So that ran through of chemo. And since then, touch wood, I've had 2 or 3 scans up until now, filming of this, which have been clear. We've looked at and sought and explored other alternatives as well, because you have to, when you're given this diagnosis, you feel that you have to leave no stone unturned. So we've had my tumor tested, sent overseas like a DNA test, and that's given some amazing data as far as if things start to go a little bit south again as far as diagnosis, and it gives you a blueprint as to how best to attack my specific cells, the cancer cells, and both for chemo, immunotherapy, and botanicals. And at this point in time, because the numbers are very low, I'm just on botanicals, in addition to obviously other supplements and antibiotics that I have to take because I have no spleen. But yeah, just a healthy focus. And I can just say, hand on heart, without the support of my wife, especially through, and the ongoing support, but especially through that surgery, you really, that I just don't know, some days how I would have got through. So it's a very difficult, you can't put the shoe in the other foot because it would be as hard for
the foot in the other shoe.
Foot in the other shoe. Yeah, foot in my mouth there. As far as how they would react and feel for me, but it's equally as important to to know that the invaluable support that they have given me and still do.
Yeah, no, it is life-changing to have this type of diagnosis. And yes, it really does make the entire family maybe reevaluate their priorities.
Without doubt.
Yeah, and how you want to spend your time and what's the most important thing to you. And I think such a shock for us was also, we will never have the answer as to how Kevin was actually in contact with asbestos, because most people link asbestos cancer with being a builder or a tradesperson. But I promise you, Kevin's one of the least. He's wonderful at many things, but tools, Kevin with tools is not his forte. But we've been in real estate for 30 years and all that we could put it down to was being in homes with asbestos amid renovation.
Building and pest inspectors and talking to them, discussing the findings of a building and pest inspection. And just potentially it's come from there.
Or walking through homes with renovation.
But it's a 20 to 40 year gestation period. So it sits in the lining of your peritoneum or your lung for 20 to 40 years before it starts to raise its ugly face.
Yes, so for us, I think what's become very important and for our children as well is to help make people aware of the dangers of asbestos, that it can be in so many places that you're not aware of. And I think people need to learn a lot more about asbestos and where it can be and how you can come into contact with it without knowing that you're coming into contact with asbestos. So that
the more awareness that you guys can do and we can help is so vital and important.
That's what we're really hopeful for, is that more and more people learn about asbestos, learn about where they can contact or be in contact with asbestos and how to avoid that contact, because it is such a lethal disease. And you know, we're very, very fortunate to be sitting here at the moment being able to talk to you. It could have not been the case, so we really value the second chance of life that Kevin's been given. And you know, really thank you very much for listening to our story today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Wow. Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but thank you so much to Kevin and Joe for being so honest and really saying it like it is, because, you know, I hear this on a daily basis from others, and it's you're so privileged to be able to hear what I hear from other families, and they've said it so well. And I'm really hoping that you'll put a question in for Kevin to answer. I'll start with Jane because I've got a couple of questions. I don't think I've got too much happening in the chat box at the moment, but I've got some burning ones. So Jane, I'll go to you first. So if you can come off your mute. Jane, in your questions, and I was just sitting there thinking about everything you were saying and what we've achieved over the last few years. How do you think the task force members have melded together? Because I didn't know.
Thanks for the question. Thanks for the question, Vicky. And the task force members come from a broad range of experience, background and roles. So across government, unions, regulatory bodies and community. So it's been that background that people have come from, which has meant that we've needed to spend time on establishing relationships and establishing trust. And I have to say, whilst I am definitely biased towards the work of the task force, I've been involved in a range of different networks and partnerships over the years, and it is incredibly strong, the membership of the task force. And it's because of that diversity of experience that people have and that real commitment to make change in relation to the management of asbestos. And Kevin and Joe's story can't do anything but energise us even more about the need of focusing on our work. So what's been really successful is those different people coming together, having trust, and trust has developed over time, having the focus on managing asbestos and having the desire to understand from each other's experiences. And it's through that we were able to have a really in-depth, good knowledge of the impacts of asbestos.
Yes, I've got to say, Kevin just really emulates why and what drives me to help try and alleviate some of these asbestos issues. I see in Kevin and Joe exactly why I'm still here and why we're still fighting to get an asbestos-free Australia, because I don't want to see the Joes and the Kevins of this world in this situation. It's totally preventable, and I believe that if we keep going like we're going, we will make a difference in the lives of these people. Another question for you, Jane, because I haven't got too much in the chat box, and I've got the chance to ask. What are the issues over this time you and I have spent together on this task force that have surprised you around asbestos?
Well, probably for me, it's about the prevalence of asbestos. So seeing in a number of locations where asbestos is present, myself, you might see from my background, I live in an old farmhouse, and I've certainly looked more at the places where asbestos would be in our home. So having my eyes opened to where asbestos could be, and just, I mean, I was aware of asbestos-related diseases, but even again, hearing from Kevin's story, you don't know where you might get asbestos-related disease from. So just the importance of us being extremely aware of asbestos and taking all the risks, taking all the action that we can to prevent the risks related to asbestos. So that's the thing that stood out for me, how common asbestos is.
Thank you for that. I'll leave you there at the moment, and I'll change over to Kevin now. Kevin, I tell you what, every time I hear an asbestos sufferer talk or their family members, I always learn something. And you've taught me something today that I didn't know, and I've been doing this for 20 odd years. So I've listened to a lot of people, but I didn't know that your asbestos didn't show up in a PET scan. I was totally shocked by that. I know about epithelioid being a very slow growing one, and it actually melds with your body and grows as it goes. But I had no idea that there's really no way to know what you had without a whole heap of tests that you've obviously had over the time, and how hard it is to diagnose mesothelioma. How is your health now at this present stage? And from diagnosis to now, is that about 3 years? I wasn't quite sure.
Well, the actual diagnosis of the mesothelioma was June last year, 2020. I had all of the conditions for the two years prior to that.
Yeah.
That was when everybody felt it was some form of Crohn's disease, and that, until we had the first laparoscopy in the hospital, which showed the biopsy showed mesothelioma. That was June 2020, so last year.
Yeah.
And since then, obviously, September was the operation, and a month in hospital. So basically, from diagnosis to now, it's almost 18 months. From the operation, it's just over a year. Health-wise, I'm feeling good. Touch wood. Yeah, look, as we said with the chat previously, it's been the scans have been pretty well clear, but because again, we have that catch-22, because we can't, from past experience and history, we can't just rely on those scans as far as Joe and I are concerned in the family. So that's why we've sought other ways of potentially tapping into where this disease is going internally, so we can capture any changes earlier rather than prevent it when a tumor forms again. So hence, that's why we went in that direction overseas. And I will have a further blood test on the 3rd of December. And the first one gave us a benchmark of how many tumour cells I had in 1.5 mils of blood. And that was 300 or 3,000, I beg your pardon, which is very low. And that number is a benchmark for us moving forward. So I guess to answer your question, we know that the cancer cells are still within my system. This is if you feel that this information from overseas is correct, and I do very strongly. We looked into it quite a long way, and this is in Germany, and apparently it's used in the UK and other sort of westernized countries. We're behind the 8 ball a little bit in Australia just because of the conservatism of our medicine. We have one of the best systems in the world, but we're a little bit slow, in my opinion, for these sorts of things. So that's where we're at. I'll get another reading on the 3rd of December. It only takes a week for that blood to go overseas and come back with all the results. And then we'll know whether the botanicals, which I've been taking for the last 5 weeks, have made any difference, or we're still the same. I mean, clearly we just want to keep an eye on things, and I'll have my normal scan. I've got a colonoscopy set for early next year and another scan, just to check that everything was okay a year after surgery. That's what my surgeon requested. I can still see my oncologist, who I'm delighted to say is on board with what we're doing overseas. So he's advocating that that's just not, he's not poo-pooing it. He's actually endorsed it to iCare, which is a big thing in a letter. So we're waiting for iCare to actually recognize that, which for people who do sadly get diagnosed with this disease, be it pleural or peritoneal, they may well have support from iCare through the foundation. And we're pushing for alternatives to actually get recognized by iCare so that it's covered and paid for. Because what we did was not a cheap exercise. The DNA testing and the blood tests, it's around $10,000, just to give you everybody an understanding. And if we got it back, it's a bonus. But that's what we wanted to do, and it's given us more of an awareness, we feel, of my particular issues with my tumor cells in my body, and that's how specific it is.
And just for those online, if you're not familiar with iCare, iCare is the healthcare system in New South Wales that looks after people with the sort of things that Kevin has. So it is a different system there. It's not just personal injury there, it's also this other system with iCare. And it's really good to see iCare coming to the fore on this and making some firsts for Australia in that sort of area. And I'm really pleased that you're doing all that. Kevin, it's been, you mentioned it, both you and Joe mentioned it, that it was a real shock to the family and to you, and it is to everybody that gets diagnosed with this. It's the last thing you think of in the scale of what could go wrong in your life. And of course, you know, you did say you had to do sort of a rounding of, you know, what is important in your life and what you should be doing. And COVID certainly hasn't helped your situation, because your bucket list would be non-existent at the moment.
It's been pushed back a bit. We've booked to go overseas for next year. Let's hope we can get there.
Oh, yes. I think there's quite a few of you that are all booked to go overseas next year, and I've got fingers crossed that we can all do that.
Absolutely.
I've got 2 people in the chat room who both Kate and Simone, who both said you're so brave, both of you and Joe, for sharing your experiences on this seminar. It is just wonderful that you could come forward. Not everybody can speak so eloquently and so precise about what you've got wrong with you. And it is a really great gift. I don't know whether that's because you're a real estate agent, that you're good with the gift of the gab or what, but you certainly put it in a nutshell today.
Thank you. Well, I think it is so important that more and more people, and I just advocate what the job that everyone's doing down there, Jane and her whole team of people, and what you've done in Victoria, and slowly I believe it is growing. We have a forum with the Governor of New South Wales next week. We've got a chat with her on asbestos and awareness. So let's hope that slowly but surely that the awareness grows and people have a better understanding. Because when my gastroenterologist, I knew asbestos disease, but when he said you've got peritoneal mesothelioma, I didn't know what that was either.
Yep.
I think people more relate to obviously pleural because it's 85% of the actual mesothelioma. But it's not so much that, it's how, you know, you can inadvertently somehow get strike a fibre in your body, be it, you know, ingesting or breathing or in breathing in, and you just don't. People still aren't aware of the dangers. They're still they're just very laid back and feel, oh, if I don't touch asbestos, it's fine. I mean, that's just basically what people feel. And you know, it can crumble, it can disintegrate, and it's only that I can't, you know, the particles you can't see. That's how small they are, the fibers. And so there's still, very sadly, just not enough awareness of what, if you think about the period of being 20 to 40 years before it raised its ugly head, that's now. You know, that's the numbers may well increase over the next 5 to 10 years. I hope they don't, but if we can make people aware of what to look for and how to look for it, and hopefully medically look towards more advancements of getting things on the PBS for immunotherapy drugs and all of those things, which, you know, because it's a small number. I guess in relation to prostate or breast cancer, but there's no cancer is great news, but there's a lot of help there because of the awareness. More awareness that we can create, potentially the more assistance we can get with those PBS drugs and everything else, so that they get on that system.
Well, there's 4,000 people dying every year of asbestos-related disease. It's not a small amount. It's 3 times the average road toll.
Yeah.
And we've got people like you, 700 to 800 people being diagnosed with mesothelioma every year. You know, these aren't, I know they're on a small scale per other diseases like you're talking about, but it is still a relevant thing, and it's so preventable. All of it's so preventable.
Yeah.
And on that too, Kevin, I've got a question from Kate in the chat box.
Sure.
She says, do you think the level of awareness amongst real estate agents is good?
I don't believe it's very interesting because there is another, it is in those numbers that you've just given, I wasn't aware of the stats annually, but I'm another real estate agent in Sydney, locally here, was just diagnosed with peritoneal mesothelioma, and sadly for him it was too late. But he was a real estate agent as well. And so it's very interesting that you know, that's just 2 examples that I'm aware of, clearly, that agents maybe still are not aware. It's not so much ignorance, but it's they're aware of asbestos, but they wouldn't understand that it's 20 to 40 year period before it shows within the system. They're not aware of how easy potentially it can be in the air still. I think everybody just wants to make it easy and just say, to make a sale, or builders or building and pest inspectors, they all put it, don't worry about it, if you don't touch it, it's fine. And that's not the case. We know that. And I think people just want to avoid it because everybody, you know, developers, builders, everybody doesn't want to go through all that red tape of asbestos removal, because it is very expensive and very difficult, and it'll take a long time and put everything back. So sadly, I feel that there are a number of challenges that we have, because people would prefer just to, look, don't worry about it so much. It's there, we're aware of it, but they really don't want to know about it, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and I've got to tell you that you put it in a nutshell, that it's all in the too hard basket, and that's what we're trying to address. That's the very issues that we need to stop putting it in the too hard basket, put some money, some significant money towards this issue, and start dealing with those issues. Identify them and deal with them. You put it in a nutshell, Kevin, and it's exactly right.
In recent years, Vicky, in New South Wales, I'm not sure about Victoria, but you had to, in your agency agreement, you had to go through an asbestos form. But it wasn't asbestos as we know it. It was just the Mr. Fluffy asbestos in the roof linings, because everybody just has to, as an owner, have to disclose if they feel that asbestos is in the roof, with the Mr. Fluffy stuff from Canberra. And that's it. It wasn't anything really to do with asbestos per se. So they've kind of circumvented the real, major issue, which is, as you say, 4,000 people a year.
I tell you, we could go on. Well, I could go on with listening to you and Jane and talking about these issues all day, but I know we're getting to the end. I thank you, Jane, very, very much, and you, Kevin, and I hope that Joe gets better very quickly for you.
Thank you.
I do have a poem at the end of this that I usually have, and if you've been here in person, Kevin, you would have heard this at some stage. When we have our events, they're normally a gathering of everybody, and I read this poem at the end of our services, and this is to families who have been affected by asbestos. So I still think it's quite relevant for anybody that's online today, and to you and everybody. The poem's called If I Knew. If I knew it would be the last time that I'd see you fall asleep, I would tuck you in more tightly and pray the Lord your soul to keep. If I knew it would be the last time that I'd see you walk out the door, I would give you a hug and a kiss and call you back for one more. If I knew it would be the last time I'd hear your voice lifted up in praise, I would videotape each action and word so I could play them back day by day. If I knew it was the last time, I could spare an extra minute to stop and say I love you instead of assuming that you know it. If I knew it would be the last time, I would be there to share your day. Well, I'm sure you'll have so many more, so I can just let this one slip away. For surely there's always tomorrow to make up for an oversight, and we always get a second chance to make everything just right. There will always be another day to say I love you, and certainly there's another chance to say anything I can do. But just in case I might be wrong, and today is all I get, I'd like to say how much I love you, and I hope we never forget. Tomorrow is not promised to anyone, young or old alike, and today may be the last chance you get to hold your loved one tight. So if you're waiting for tomorrow, why not do it today? For if tomorrow never comes, you'll surely regret the day that you didn't take the extra time for a smile, a hug, or a kiss, and you were too busy to grant someone what turned out to be their last wish. So hold your loved ones close today and whisper in their ear. Tell them how much you love them and that you'll always hold them dear. Take time to say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, or it's okay. And if tomorrow never comes, you'll have no regrets about today. And I think that's just so poignant of what we deal with. And I get emotional every time I say that. And I've been saying that poem for nearly 20 years. It is just so out there. And Kevin, I am just in awe of your bravery and everything you're doing. And Jane, I am just so pleased that you are our chair for our task force and that we're driving change into the future. And I hope to see change in any way possible, because I don't want to see another Kevin in front of my screen telling me the situation he's in. Thank you to everybody that's joined us today, and God bless you, and I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you so much for joining us. Farewell, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.